Hello, and welcome to the 5th video of the CodeGenHero tutorial series. In this video, we'll set up dependency injection for our solution, letting the Blazor application and web API make use of the service classes generated in the previous video, following an inversion of control pattern. Now, even though your service classes have been generated, you can't use them quite yet. If you run the solution as it is right now, you will see your controllers and Swagger that were generated, but these do not yet have access to your DB context. At this stage, we will need to manually write a few lines in our startup classes to expose these generated classes to our DI framework. Our first stop will be startup.cs of the API project. In this class, DI for the API starts at line 54. Here, you'll find a commented out block of code for registering a DB context. Uncomment it and substitute in the name of your DB context class. In our case, this is called Artist Site DB Context. Don't forget to import your entity's namespace, which can be quickly done by tapping Alt-Enter with the caret over your class name. Next, we'll need to add injection for the AutoMapper class, which converts tracked entity framework objects from the DB context into untracked DTO objects that will be sent over the wire for our Blazor application to consume. A default class is already registered as it is required for the API to launch out of the box. Replace the reference to this default profile class with your generated AutoMapper profile, which for this demo is called AS AutoMapper profile. Once again, import the namespace for this class. Below is another block of commented code for the repository class to be registered. This class is the bridge between your API controllers and the DB context itself. Once again, substitute in the name of your generated interface and implementation, following the pattern demonstrated in the example given in the block. In this demo's case, the interface is called IAS repository, and its implementation is simply AS repository. Finally, the last class needing to be injected is our generic factory class, used to instantiate DTOs and entities for conversion, as both are passed to and from the API and Blazor app. Following the example here, register your interface and implementation, named IAS generic factory and AS generic factory in our solution here. If you test your API in Swagger now, you should be able to get data from your artist site database, unlike before. Now, while our API is ready to go, our Blazor application itself will need a service class of its own injected, which will be used by it to communicate with the API and perform persisted CRUD operations against the database. We'll need to inject this in two places. First, our client project, and then our server project. While the app project will be the one that actually uses it directly, the client and server projects are what host the app, and are responsible for resolving its interfaces. First, in the client project, open program.cs and go down to line 77, where a comment will say you should inject generated data service classes. Make a new line and add a method call to builder.services.addScoped, placing your web API data service interface and implementation in the generic field. Then, in the server project, open startup.cs and go to line 97, which will have the same comment as before. Once again, make a new line, this time calling services.addScoped, using your web API data service interface and implementation in its generic. With these added, you will be ready to begin using the Web API data service from your Blazor application in either WebAssembly or SignalR form to access a remote API application which abstracts access to your persisted database. In the next video, we will begin work on the artist site application proper and begin demonstrating how to make use of the generated Web API data service and its included helper classes to send and receive data to and from the API.